Hello, everyone. Glad y'all can join us tonight. We're going to be talking about, as I was preparing for this show and was creating the presentation for Cyclops, and that's what we was going to talk about this week prior to our preparing for the trip in the Midwest next week, and looking at clusters and serial offenders. On my news feed, the Stockton issue with this serial offender out there, Single Mom of Four became a user. Thank you for your support. It means a lot to us, and we appreciate it. And but as I was preparing and seeing what that this police chief came out and made a public statement saying that they had a serial killer or met the definition of a serial killer. I looked at that and I said, well, we'll use it and talk about it and to do a public service announcement on that. And as we present and prepare for Cyclops, because serial offenders, regardless of who they are targeting, operate very similar, have different motivations and things, but they all have a certain pattern of behaviors that we can look at. And so that's what we're going to use tonight. We're going to look at that, and we'll get started here. All right. As always, this is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm retired law enforcement. Had 20 years of service. During that time frame, I started on my career out in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator, and had all different types of training, everything from SWAT up to becoming a state certified crime scene tech, which that most certainly enhanced my abilities as an investigator and processing crime scenes, and used all that skill sets that I learned to better serve my community. And after I retired and became aware of the true crime world and the web sleuths, I decided that seeing what was going on some of the issues of people talking about certain crimes and how they were looking at them, that law enforcement looks at from a different perspective. And I thought this would be an opportunity for me to be able to become an ambassador for law enforcement and have an impact on the web sleuth world, and maybe have a chance that working together that we could have an impact. And so that's what we're here for. But prior to us getting into the serial offenders, also on my newsfeed today, this popped up that we have a family of four missing out of California, because we're going to be looking at the Stockton, Oakland serial killer. But while I was doing that research, I saw about an hour and a half south of there, this family of four was abducted from their business, or from a business. And I just wanted to put it out there because it involves a husband, wife, and a child. And we most, if anyone's out there that is in the area, has any knowledge of any of this, call law enforcement, give them those leads that they need to save this family and this child. The suspect on this is, and this has nothing to do with the serial offender that we're looking at, but this is the suspect as a man with a shaved head and a light complexion. They haven't determined what the motive behind that reported kidnapping is, but like I said, I just wanted to throw that in there. It was a last minute thing this evening as I was refining my presentation for tonight, and thought it would be good while we're looking at California to go ahead and bring this up. And so anyone in that area out there, let's try to help this family and find that child and bring them all home safe. But one of the things about the serial offenders, and that I was going to discuss with the Cyclops program, which for you, those out that are unfamiliar with Cyclops, it's a program that we developed here with True Crime Web, that as I was doing research and trying to locate the victims of a certain age group, that as I went through the internet and went to different states and was hunting clusters of what might be indicators of serial offenders in certain geographical locations, that it was extremely difficult with the databases out there to search for a certain age group. And so that's what gave us the idea of creating our own database with volunteers, which they have been extremely. We are so grateful to have them, that they send us the data, and we input that information, and we create a Cyclops so that you can go in there and you look for any, little parameters of certain age groups from 0 to 19 of age, but they're broke down to 3 different subgroups of that. So if you're looking for somebody extremely young, say from 8-year-old, you can go in there and find 8-year-olds, and either side of that by a few years. But we wanted to do that so it would be easier for other people that lived in communities that might be looking for missing persons, or we're looking for serial offenders that might be in certain areas of the country to assist us, or creators that were going out there to create their own content, or even law enforcement look at it and see what was going on with within certain regions of the United States. So that's what we created Cyclops for, and it's been extremely successful for us as far as getting that information in there. We've got thousands of names in there, and we've only been around for, I think, creating content for about 4 months now, and going on 5 months. But we've got thousands of names out there from murdered and missing children, and we thought that would be important to be able to present to and give people the opportunity to go out there and work on these cases if they chose so. But once you look at the geographical profiling, and what is geographical profiling, looking within a certain area of where crimes are being committed and possibly by a certain offender, it's just that offenders typically operate within a certain location that's close to safe zones, or zones that they feel safe in, which is usually their home territories. When we go out as law-abiding citizens, we operate within our own geographical stable areas. We shop within those areas. We work within that area. Everything we do is pretty well located around our home zone. Well, it's the same whenever you have a serial offender, regardless if he's a serial killer, serial rapist, whatever he is, if he's a burglary guy, whatever types of crimes he's committing, they work within certain areas that they feel comfortable with, areas they have knowledge of, areas they're very, very familiar with, so that they know the ins and outs. And they spent some time there trying to understand how to not only target certain victims, but how to escape from those areas should they ever be pursued or become in danger of being exposed. And so it's just a part of their survival instinct when you have a serial offender that they operate in that manner. If they don't, they're not very successful, and they're caught up and apprehended pretty quickly by law enforcement. But some of them, it takes years. And with certain serial offenders, and one of the things that drawed me to this Stockton one is that so many crimes has been linked to this one MO of how they're operating. They've linked these crimes together in such a short period of time. In Cyclops and other serial killings, sometimes it may be that these crimes occur over many, many years. And so it may take years to discover that you do have a serial offender. BTK, he operated on years, but he also made it public and let everyone know what he was doing as he was in those areas, and had signatures so that people could recognize his work. But there's others that do the same thing, and so we have to look at those. And so as we go on, we have David Berkowitz up in New York, Son of Sam. Everybody, they've made documentaries on him. He's absolutely, he was brutal. He go out to some of the and find these people parking in vehicles, and he would shoot them. And 44 caliber. He was known as 44 caliber killer, Son of Sam. But they called him because he was geographically stable and within a metropolitan area. And then we have Aaron. I can't pronounce that last name, but Anyway, he was in Arizona, and the same thing. He was geographical stable, staying within a certain region of the state, and is whenever you have a lot of shootings and you become stable, it's far easier for law enforcement to be able to interdict and possibly set up some type of areas of controls and be able to identify that shooter from all different types of patrol techniques, observation points, choke points, understanding what type of individual is, what his timeline is, what his manner of operations are. And with modern technologies now, with all the cameras that's out there, some data is going to be coming up. As you know, he may be able to avoid some of the technologies, but eventually he's not going to be able to avoid all the technologies. As we see here, we have this blurry image that law enforcement has released of the Stockton shooter as he started committing these crimes. And today, when I found out that there was more than just the 5 that the police chief, Dark Hearts by Adrian. Thank you so much for all you guys do. It's difficult for LE to admit that there's a serial killer in the area. What are the pros and cons? Well, the pros is that you're being proactive and you're letting the law enforcement have communications and telling the public that, you know, you need to shelter, take precautions. We have an offender out there. We don't know who he is. And we need help at limiting the amount of people that he has access to harm. And they give you little safety tips, you know, about don't be alone. They tell you that he has a certain pattern that he likes low lit areas, no cameras, isolated. He likes certain morning hours, late at night, early morning. And law enforcement shared that information. And it's at great risk. You know, they could have just kept it close to the vest and never told anyone and go out and do their stakeouts, set up and put those law enforcement officers out there walking those dark areas and may have caught him, but over what time frame and how many other losses of life? Because until you really build a sound understanding timeline of where he is operating and how he's operating and finding those areas, because, you know, what does he find have that most appeals to him, and have they identified all of that? We don't know yet. Behavioral science units, I'm sure, are working on it as it goes. So they did, you know, jeopardize that they won't be able to run some operations, although they'll still run those operations, but maybe not as effective now that the serial offender, he knows he's being looked at for. He knows that there's going to be certain traps set out there, and he's going to be extremely wary of that. But law enforcement chose to make it public, and I agree with them that, you know, it's not worth losing innocent lives by trying to just keep something close that, well, we have a 1 in a million chance of getting him. Whereas if you don't come out and tell everybody, it's not worth the life of one of your loved ones. And so they've chosen to do so. I agree with them. And regardless of how they may have been able to do certain tactics and set certain traps. And but as we look at these technologies of what they've done and these murders that he has committed so far, then they released some more information that, whereas they thought that he was pretty geographical stable in a certain location, being Stockton, they've now linked him to 2 shootings in Oakland, 1 murder, and then 1 the victim did survive. And they'll be looking at those victims because those were pre this last 5 killings in Stockton. With knowing this new knowledge and that the time frame has jumped from just being in July or so all the way back to April, they're going to be looking at a lot more cases across the state of California and other states also, as they bring in these task force And you can see the area that they first credited him with that gave an indication, being in Stockton, of a geographical location that's just a few miles across. There's great potential of certain plans and strategies they could have employed, and they will be employing them, and hopefully they'll get him. They'll be doing everything from just random stops, Terry searches, which is seeing suspicious persons, going up there, patting them down, attempting to locate any type of weapons or anything on a person that's acting suspiciously or out in certain areas at certain times. And so hopefully they will have an impact and able to isolate this individual fairly quickly. They had a recent one in Florida last year, I think there were, that was going on, whereas they had a very similar offender, and they were able to go out there, be proactive, and locate him very quickly. And so
I have one update.
Okay.
Support with Steffa says that the suspect has been caught that took the family against their will, but family still not found.
Okay, excellent. Well, it's excellent he's been caught, but it's a tragedy they haven't found the family yet.
So
hopefully they will find the family, and hopefully it won't be a tragedy, although if they were out and able to call law enforcement, I expect they would. But hopefully he'll lead them to a location where they're being held and they're still alive. That's all we can hope for right now.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you, Steph. And but whenever you have the geographical location that are stable, it's far easier for investigations. And but once you become mobile and you start, just like with the Golden State killer, that he was across multiple jurisdictions, multiple cities, and ran rampant for a long time. Hopefully this won't be the case with this individual here. But the department is being proactive. They've notified law enforcement, or law enforcement has notified the public, and they're telling the public what's going to happen, that they're going to create this task force. They've got the federal, state, county, they got the analysts. They're going to have all the camera room operators, because they're anticipating, I saw in one of the articles of where they've been asking for everyone with Ring technologies on their homes, from cameras to doorbells and any other type of security cameras, to send that information in if you see someone or something suspicious throughout these days. And then they'll have the evidence technicians that are working on the crime scenes that link these cases, and will link more. But as you can see, started July the 8th, August 11th, August 30th, September 21st, September 27th. Those last two dates, when he went down to just a 6-day, you can look at the first and you see it was a month, or just over a month, and then just around 20 something days, and then once again 20 to something days, and then he went down to 6 days, and which makes you fearful that is he escalating and more active. But the more active he becomes, the more at risk he will be at getting caught. And hopefully when he goes out and he tries to do or another shooting, that they're able to intercept him and do what's necessary to put him where he needs to be. But these are the victims and the days they were killed. And there is, they're males. Of the first 5, they were all males. One of them, most of them are of Hispanic backgrounds. And is that targeting? Is he identifying them? Don't know. Law enforcement hasn't let that out. We don't know what the individuals were doing. We don't know. I don't have any background on them. How did he find them? How long did he stalk them? How long has he targeted them? And has he targeted them prior to? Just because these are the days they were killed or assaulted doesn't mean that's the first contact. Some of these offenders may identify a potential victim and become aware of their normal habits. But when they do the victimologies on all 5 of these individuals, they're going to see, is there something in common that they all had in common with each other, either by knowing each other, visiting certain areas, because all the victims are from, of these 5 are from a geographical location of just a few miles. So it's very possible that these individuals cross paths with each other and never know that they were crossing paths with another victim. That may be in the days to come. But the victimologies will reveal all that information of their shopping habits and what they were doing in the final days prior to, or when they crossed paths with a serial offender. But if you have any information, there's a number here to contact. And also, if, call 911 if you do see something suspicious, or if you see that someone matching. I mean, there's not much to work on right now. You got a tall, thin, dark figure in the morning hours. There's not a lot to work on that, because that matches a lot of descriptions of a lot of people. But then law enforcement announced that this individual has also attacked and shot 2 other people. That on April 16th, he shot a victim in Stockton, which still geographical location is pretty close to where he has shot the other 5 since then. But also he had traveled April the 10th. And the first one that we have knowledge of is the Oakland shooting, April the 10th, that law enforcement says is linked. How is it linked? We don't know. But it was enough for the law enforcement to say, yes, it's linked. So whatever they have is good enough for me. We get the information out there. So people out there that live in this area, or you have contact with people out there that, that know, and they have an individual that might be part of family, friends, work habits, or maybe even contracts. If you know someone that was in Stockton April the 16th and was in Oakland on April the 10th, you need to let law enforcement know that information, because it is, a couple hours travel time between the 2. And so that information has to be relayed to law enforcement. But the Oakland shooting, once again, was in those early morning hours, 4:15. Which, what does that tell you about this offender? And what does he like about the night hours? It appears to be that he's extremely comfortable in those hours. Has he worked most of his life and is awake at those hours normally due to his work habits? Is he out there working a job where he has the ability that during certain time periods he can step away from his work? Is that, what is he doing? And the behavioral science units are going to be looking at that, because this nocturnal operations, most of people are at home asleep at that time. Most of your large businesses aren't operating then. You have very limited industries of certain types of industries operating then. But you do have a lot of people that aren't working, that could be off. And that tells you something, that if he's not out there doing it while he's at work, then he has the ability, the freedom that and the home life, that he can walk away from home, and he doesn't have a significant other saying, where are you going at 4 o'clock in the morning? Why aren't you at home? Where have you been? What are you doing at 4, 3, 2 o'clock in the morning? And so if that's the case, someone will be calling in that information. If they live with such an individual that is roaming the streets at night when he should be at home in bed, that is very revealing in and of itself, because behavioral science looks at those people and they try to determine how a person could be available to commit such crimes at certain times. And there's only so many different ways. But the common denominators on background that some of these serial offenders have And even when we look at Cyclops, when we start looking at the people that target children, they all have, certain background characteristics that sometimes they're notable, sometimes they're not. It's not a guarantee, but more often than not, they do carry some of these common denominators. Mental illness, psychopathy, they're victims of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. They have fetishes, necrophilia, partialism. They have fascinating with fire setting. And also, I think there was one other part about animal cruelty. It cut it off on this one for whatever reason. But that's just part of what some of these individuals do that have this these psychopaths and type of personalities that are out there that's going out and committing these crimes. Then you have the motivation, and there's more, but the basic types. And the next slide after this, we'll talk about some of the other motivation of the basic type. But you have certain offenders that when they go out and they commit these crimes, they commit them, and it feeds their fantasies in several different ways. And what type of personality are they? What is feeding their fantasy? Are they visionary, motivated? Are they mission oriented, hedonistic? Gives them pleasure in what they're doing. Are they power, control? And there's many more, the thrills. And there's so many different motivation and different types out there, which the next slide here, you'll have to just blow up the screen, but this covers a large portion of them. And so that whenever you look at this, read in there, and you'll be able to see the different types of motivators for these psychopaths and these serial offenders, serial killers, that when they go out there and they're looking for these victims, they're going to fall within these guidelines of some of this. And extremely dangerous individuals, not people that you want to confront. And so if you have information on them, let law enforcement know. And because on this individual right now, this is drive time between Oakland and Stockton. We're looking at over an hour, so that when he was, that's still, we've got these two cities, but there's a lot of cities and a lot of people between these locations that could be victims. And they're going to be looking at all these areas and these common roads and businesses that are open that may have been victims that they don't recognize yet, that they're going to look at. And so do I think the numbers are going to climb of potential victims? Yes, I sadly do believe that there will be some others identified in the coming days, and that he's probably been operating for a while, because we have, let's see, from April to July, you got 2 months there that's unaccounted for. Did he stop during that period? We hope he did, but there's a lot of reasons that he wouldn't have stopped also. And so during those periods, they're going to be going back, looking at the crimes and certain areas and seeing if they can link more cases. And as they build a timeline of this individual and narrow the scope and narrow the field and start understanding his travel movements, because with the more victims you have, the more they'll be able to identify that, and the more technologies he would have been exposed to prior to and after these crimes. But right now there's a reward out there, $95,000 for him. Hopefully that isn't what it takes for someone to come up and give the information to capture him. Do it for the right reasons, but also $95,000 is something that is life-changing for a lot of people. And so I'm glad that information's out there. I'm glad that money's out there. And if that's what it takes to get this killer off the street, that's what we want to do. And there's the contact number for if you have any information on him. And so with that being said, I guess we'll go to our questions.
Okay. And Eileen is going to start us off.
Excellent.
With, seems California has had a lot of serial killers.
They have, and historically them and the West Coast, but they're everywhere also. when we were first becoming aware of some of the serial killers during the training, back in when the FBI was teaching some of the courses, they 50 to 70 active serial killers that they knew at any one moment in the United States. Is there more than that? Absolutely. How many more? You can go out there and they'll report that it's still the same all the way up into the thousands of these people out there. And with modern technologies and access to the internet, are these serial offenders becoming, and even with the CSI programs that they can watch, are they becoming better educated? Some of them are, but some of them still have that drive and that fantasy that no matter what they see, they're going to have certain parts of their crimes that's driven by that fantasy. They have no way of controlling that. That's part of their life, and that would be seen in the crime scene, and that is what will lead to their capture and demise.
And support with Steffa. I think this is the first serial killer that I can remember being aware of in my lifetime that is on the loose. It is so scary.
Yeah, you're not as old as I, not Mrs. Steve.
Thanks.
As me. I was pointing doing the age.
Yeah.
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 But but I've seen a few of them, and I've met one or two even prior to law enforcement. I met at least one serial offender that went to death row. But then after law enforcement, I met a lot of serial offenders across the board, from everything from rapists, child molesters, to serial offenders that had killed more than one. Not classified as a serial killer, although I think that they could be.
And Molly, Stockton is a rough city. Had a lot of crime problems for quite a few years.
Never been to Stockton. Never been there.
And just Pam, today they linked a murder from April of last year in Oakland to the serial killer. That makes 7.
Yes.
And Anna Lizette, when that's for me. When Mrs. Steve gets around to finding statistics in this Idaho-Oregon border area, I can probably find pertinent details on cases. Low population, and I've lived here a long time. Okay, perfect. Oregon is done. Idaho, not yet. So I'll do that one.
And also send me an email. I'm interested in what you might know about Michael Vaughn, Monkey, and how much information you have on him.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Kiwi Bridget, that looks like a woman. I'm thinking she's talking about Stockton.
Yes. And that's going to be debated. I've seen where some people are saying it's a tall, thin man, built like a man. So right now we have that silhouette. What is it he or she? I couldn't tell you.
He's got some slim hips.
I would go more male, but
All right. Forever yours. I live in California, and this man been killing since 2021, and they just now letting the citizens know.
Call in that information to law enforcement. They may already have it, but whatever your theories are and whatever victims you know, let law enforcement know. Absolutely, let them know.
And Molly, do they just have the, quote, grainy picture of the killer, or is there moving film? Looks somewhat like a female, but hard to tell based on just that photo.
I don't know if they've done the same thing that they did with the Delphi, and they just captured one image and did the best they could with it. I'm sure that that if they have a walking video of him, I would most certainly ask that law enforcement release that so that we can see his walking gait, mannerisms, how he carries, how he swings his arms, and see his natural movement in a walk. But hopefully they will release whatever they have.
All right. And Lynn said that they released a video today, and I've got the KCR83
Okay.
the TV,
Uh-huh.
for you
Yeah.
to go check that out.
Thank you. And
Okay.
yeah, like I said, when I created this stuff, I was evidently I was behind on a couple of these things. Thank y'all.
All right. And Molly, it's really easy to get from Oakland to Stockton, even though it's a distance, train, freeway, etc. Lots of commuters come in from Stockton.
And the time frame of that will help law enforcement. If he's in any type of public transit, those camera systems on those dates will help law enforcement.
And checking convictions. This guy, gal seem to not have a set type. Is that unusual?
Well, it depends on what, right now we're, you got 7 victims identified. 6 of them is male. So did the female, we don't know what the female looked like. Was she mistaken as a male? We just don't have that information yet. But whenever you have, what is it, 80 something percent of the victims being male versus the other 20% being female, then they do have a certain type that they're looking for. But we just don't know if that female that was injured, that survived, was mistaken.
All right. And Forever Yours, this, what they did with the grim sleeper serial killer that killed over 100 women in South Central LA, California, is a very low income side of Los Angeles, California.
Yes, the grim sleeper. That is there were so many opportunities over the years that could be identified. Sad case.
And Steffa, he is getting more and more frequent. It is like he's getting more of an appetite for these horrible acts.
If like the other information earlier that, has he been working for multiple years? That is a possibility. Is his mental capacity degrading? What's driving him to this number of victims within such a close time frame? We don't know yet. Hopefully law enforcement knows and is working towards that end.
And Molly, he's speeding up. Hopefully he is easier to catch then.
Yes, like I said, there's certain tactics law enforcement will be bringing to the table that you normally wouldn't have, from everything from manpower to, looking at these people. If he's in the streets and he's walking and they have what they have of him, they may have better information on what he exactly looks like. And whatever that identity is, they're going to have those lookouts. Those law enforcement officers are going to be out there, and they're going to be looking for this individual, no doubt.
In Kiwi, Bridget, I live a couple of hours from there.
Take the necessary precaution. Do exactly what law enforcement says. Don't be out by yourself, and during these hours, if you can be somewhere safe and locked up during those hours, highly recommend it.
If you got friends, share. All right. And Forever Yours, sir, why do they take so long to alert the public?
And I don't know. I don't know how long they took. I mean, if you look at when did the lab reports come in on this case? Because on the 5 that they first identified that they had a serial killer, you're looking from July to now, which is still, several months. And so during those 120 days, 90 days, whatever timeline, what lab reports, what technicians were looking at, how were they linking the cases together? Did they find, from the autopsy, were they able to recover ammo? Were they able to identify the bullets being fired from a certain guns due to the lands and grooves, or did they have to do metal testing, metallurgy to identify the bullets and make sure they're from the same manufacturer? We don't know what the lab reports were and how long it took them to link this, and is that what are the links? And but now that they've linked them, how long did they wait? Could they have waited longer? Probably, but hopefully they didn't wait too long. Hopefully they minimize the risk to the public.
And Molly, Bay Area is so diverse in culture, races. It may be hard to pinpoint why and who.
Oh, of course, you're right, and it is. I mean, when you have these high populations, and you know you're looking at a metropolitan area, that it's not that you just have one individual after a certain hour on the streets. You got thousands of people walking these streets. You got thousands of businesses open. They're open 24/7. And so it's not like this offender is going to stick out like a sore thumb. He's working within a certain profile of the public that he feels comfortable in, and moving within that structure so that he can operate freely.
And double rainbows, I wish that Long Island cereal would finally get revealed and caught.
That's another interesting case, and I've been asked to look at that, and some other creators, we've discussed it, and we may at some point look at that a little bit.
And Molly, I have friends in Oakland. I can let them know if they've seen anything.
Thank you, and most certainly take care of your friends and family. I know you was out there for a while yourself.
And checking convictions, easy targets at that hour, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's normal downtime, and you're not ever expecting. And I worked night shifts for many, many years. I enjoy working night shifts because you could sit there and watch certain businesses that you knew that if there were certain types of offenders in the area, that they would come and they would either try to rob those locations or otherwise. And but that was what we did whenever we did stakeouts and things, and anticipated certain crimes. But the predators also that commit these crimes do the exact same thing.
And true crime with sunshine, third shift kind of guy, like street sweeping.
Well, some of my third shift was not always voluntary. Sometimes it was that my boss said that was the way he would regulate some of the punishment sometimes, but both ways. But I enjoyed third shift, really did. A lot cooler, and you knew the types of personalities you were dealing with at night.
Olivia, too. At night, the killer can possibly not be seen.
And that is absolutely true. And it's also advantageous for law enforcement because they can set up and watch, and from certain overwatch areas, and see a large part of because these guys are going to be walking within lights, street lights, business lights, and you want to have those dogs barking. There's a lot of ways that once you become accustomed to the environment, that when someone that's not regularly within that environment enters into it, you may be 4 blocks away, but when that dog starts barking, and it hasn't barked in the week prior to you being on stakeout, and then you hear the next dog bark, where movement is.
All right. And Molly, in Bay Area, at True Crime Web, also in Bay Area, because commutes take so long, it's common for people to be out that early and for traffic to already be getting bad so it wouldn't be deserted. Wow.
Now, some of these times were even earlier, it starts 11, 12 o'clock, but then some of them were 4 or 6 o'clock. So you're right. Some people get up extremely early and their jobs start at 4 o'clock.
All right. And level-headed. So do you think it is multiple gunmen or do you think it's one person?
Law enforcement left the door open that they can identify it just being one. And they've also mentioned that they didn't think it was gang related. um, the numbers wise, I would be looking at just a single offender. But law enforcement left that door open that they could go either way. And I don't know why they did. I don't know if they have certain evidence or other images or some information. Might be from witnesses that have called in that's given different descriptions that are conflicting. But they left the door open that it might be more than one. But I would, just like with the son of Sam, there was a lot of different descriptions given on him. But it eventually, and now there's been documentaries that there was more than one son of Sam. So you're always going to have some of those theories. But right now, I'm going towards more just one single offender until we get other information.
And forever yours. I hope he doesn't come out here in Southern California. Who knows? He could be making his way here.
And that was the sad part or the scary part for me when I was doing my research on it. I thought he was geographically stable, that we were looking just Stockton. And then all of a sudden, Oakland popped into the picture, which is, once we start doing them 1 hour or 2 hour drives, he can most certainly go. He has the ability and the to move in different locations.
In Kiwi, Bridget, it used to be that SoCal was rougher, but it's definitely changing up here in the north.
Yeah, I went out there to pick up a prisoner one time, and I've never had the desire to go back. It's beautiful country, but I was in some rough areas. I didn't know that such a place could even exist in such a beautiful part of the country. And here in Georgia, in the rural areas, it's nothing like, it's impossible to even compare Georgia to California. It's just two different regions of the United States.
Do double rainbows? Do serial killers ever compete with one another? That is an awesome question.
That is a great question. Probably unknowingly that you have serial offenders that work within the same geographical region. They just don't know that they're both operating, or they may know they're both operating, and they may use that to their advantage, but it's also to their disadvantage. Because when you look at Washington State, you had, you'll have certain areas that from Ted Bundy to the Green River Killer and killers across the United States, that you may have some of these metropolitan areas where there's more than one or two serial offenders targeting the same victim group, especially prostitution and things, because that's one of the highest profile victim groups out there for serial killers. And but I doubt that any two are ever competing on a personal basis, but within a certain regional area, absolutely. That's a great question.
Gotta hold on 1 second. You're probably sharing a little bit too much down there. All right. And Molly, at True Crime Web from Oakland, the SK can take the BART over 24 to Antioch, then Caltrack to Stockton, located close to one another.
And if he's doing that, and they and law enforcement starts checking, and there's certain things within a certain time frame, most all that, like I said, law enforcement would be looking at all the security surveillance of those areas and how movement was made.
If your alarm goes off, it's Nikki. Okay.
There's
Okay, she's coming back from Megan's.
Oh, okay.
All right. And Ann, outstanding briefing regarding Stockton's situation. Thanks, Mr. Steve.
That's what we want to do. And like I say, if y'all have people out there and family, I'm sure they know it, and I'm sure they're scared to death of being in that area. And hopefully law enforcement will be able to get this in hand pretty quick. Hopefully.
Okay, that was her.
Yeah, alarm system's going on.
Yeah. And Lynn, is there a social media angle to meeting them, or just wrong place, wrong time?
The victimologies will reveal that they're going to be looking at these men and what are their life patterns. What do they do? How do they communicate? Are they, you know, are they in a certain relationship, or do they frequent certain areas, bars? Do they have a certain style of life? We don't know. Law enforcement will know. And when they start looking at these areas, because like I said, all the victims are geographically stable within a certain area in Stockton. And so they may have crossed lives, and they may at some point, you know, you start getting from 5 victims, you get 2 or 3 of them that have a common denominator. Law enforcement is going to take notice of that.
And support with Steffa, Jolisa Fuentes went missing only 2 hours from Stockton in Selma, California. Eek.
Yes, and who knows? And I think that was early morning hours when she was seen at the store.
And Raggedy Susan, I used to live the next town over from BTK. The last person he killed was found just a few miles from our house.
BTK, he is one that, for the record books, he absolutely is, and he is a great case study of everything.
You like him, don't you?
No, I don't like him.
I mean, I know you don't like him, but you've looked at him a bunch.
I looked at him a bunch. I actually had a friend that was in the security industry during that time period that BTK was in Wichita working in the security industry also. And he was a supplier for his company. And he said, I know I had to meet him, just didn't know it. And we often discuss BTK. Dennis Rader.
And forever yours. In the 80s, it was so many serial killers in Southern California that they were bumping into each other. That's scary.
Gosh, I can't imagine that. Like I said, you had the Golden State, you had Zodiac. I mean, there were so many of them out there. You're absolutely right. The Grim Sleeper. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right. And Teresita Hillis, this guy seems to be very much out of control.
And if that is the case, you know, if he is starting a mental decline, he'll make those mistakes, and that will lead to his demise.
And yes, it was early morning. Jolisa vanished.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think Levelhead, you may have some video on that.
Okay. And Molly, any similarities do you think this has to do with the DC sniper? Random people he came upon?
Well, the DC sniper, he did have everything he did was for a purpose. Eventually, he was going to murder a certain individual. Is this what this individual is going to do? Law enforcement will look at, because that is a path that law enforcement has become familiar with, that sometimes certain offenders will create certain crimes to cover up an intended target. But it's possible that might have the same motivation values. We just don't know, but they'll be looking at that path. Good thought.
Good Lord, these things just keep coming. All right. And Single Mama 4. So their crime is fueled by their fetishes and fantasies?
Some of them are, but you know, when you look at the different motives, and I mean, you got visionary, you have mission oriented, hedonistic, thrill killers, power control. All of them have different reasons of why they commit these crimes. And you can go in there and look at it. Some of them like it for the thrill of the hunt. I mean, you're dealing with these psychopaths that absolutely, you know, they have whatever desire, and to feed that desire and that hunger to commit these crimes, they go out and do it. And they're driven, and some of them more so than others. But whatever it takes for them, some of them may only have to commit a crime once every 2 or 3 years. This individual here has gotten it down to where he's committing them within days. And that's scary for the population out there.
And Anna Lizette, how many serial killers eventually retire and are never caught?
Lots of them, far more than are caught. Now, will that change as technologies advance, such as it did with the Golden State Killer? I hope so, because now, as our future serial killers become aware of the DNA and the advances in it, will they take the measures to counter that? Some of them will. Not all of them. Some of them it won't matter because they're going to do what they do. But most of the older serial killers, we should, in the coming years, start finding more and more of them being identified from their DNA profile, something they never imagined during the 60s, 70s, early 80s. Even into the 90s and 2000s, they didn't know how prominent and how advanced science was going to go. Now, we will probably start seeing changes in the future generations of serial offenders.
What? Would an angel of death that slowly poisons their patients come under thrill killer?
Oh, yeah, there's some of the nurses and stuff.
Okay. All right. And checking convictions. They say you will walk by 50 serial killers in your lifetime.
I heard that stat before. I don't know if that's true. I'd like to see some of the what they base that on. Is it just the number that they think's within a certain population, and then you divide that by how many people? But that is an interesting stat I had seen before.
And Paper Chaser, do you think that mass shooters are becoming more prevalent than serial killers?
No. I think if we were when we approach that number, it's going to be
bad.
Yes, it's going to be extremely tragic, even if we even get close to that number.
And Sweet Caroline, these days we are not safe anywhere.
No, and you have to take certain precautions and be absolutely aware of your situational awareness and your environment at all times. And you know, a lot of these victims never see it coming, and that's what these predators rely upon. That they're going to sit there and they look for certain characteristics of their victims, and when they find that characteristics, that's what they work on.
And Dandelions and Daisies, he's got away with it so far. Why would he stop?
You're right. He won't stop until he's made to stop.
Yep. And Anne Vroom, sorry if I missed it, are all the manner of deaths the same? And was there evidence of SA in all or any?
I don't think there was any type of assaults in any of these that law enforcement released. And from the shooter aspect of it, they have some type of firearm that they're looking for, or certain caliber or something that they're looking for that they've identified that appears to link these cases as more than just shooting victims, because everywhere in the country, people are getting shot daily. So it's more than just shooting. There has to be another evidential link to these cases that they've identified.
And Support with Steffa, will LE go undercover to pretend to be one of his victims to catch him?
Potential victims, absolutely. That's some of the tactics I was talking about, that they're going to put people out there. You have officers that it's not a problem to become bait. They're going to go out there and do what's necessary. And it's at great risk, but they'll do it.
And True Crime with Sunshine, do you think that a street sweeper would be a good occupation for this perp? A good way to know homeless camps and be out normally that time of night or morning?
Yeah, there's a lot of occupation, not just street sweepers, but you're correct. Yes, there's a lot of occupations out there. It could be in all aspects of job descriptions. So you got your cab, you got Uber. You've got so many different industries out there now that are operating 24/7 7 and within those hours. And he fits in there somewhere, and law enforcement will look at that.
Okay, let's see here. All right, I think I got them all. I'm trying to get everybody. Double rainbows. Cereals don't look like monsters. It's scary too.
It is. Some of the people I've interviewed and talked to that you would never think that they were anything other than a good person, worked hard, and you couldn't tell from their appearance that they or mannerisms just how evil they were.
And unsolved crimes uncovered. Why are serial killers so elusive? Is Ellie encouraged to post information anywhere that will signal to another jurisdiction victims recovered?
Law enforcement has VICAP, which was maintained with the FBI so that they can go in there and look at the violent crimes, and they'll link certain crimes. And so they have a way of filtering and gauging what's happening in certain parts of the country and assisting law enforcement in linking certain crimes, just in case you do have one that picks up from one location and goes to the other. And sometimes these offenders, they operate so seldom, and it takes numerous years to identify. And that was the reason I looked at this one, to bring notice to it, especially because everything has accelerated on this individual. He popped up on the radar, and law enforcement's going after him.
And this comes from a conversation inside of this, right? So this is where I shared. This just cracks me up. Daisy, my dogs have a large vocabulary. A bunch of us talk to our dogs like I talk to ours, and
they know ours, her dogs.
Mine answer, right? I mean, everybody else's does too. So there you go. And I can't remember, but somebody has to pick up a dog to take it to the back door. I've got one just like that too. So, there you go. All right. And Misty, I don't want to butcher that last name. I was watching a show on Peacock that there were competing serial killers in Arizona. The show is Mark of a Serial Killer, season 3, episode 10. 3 guys, two were working together. That would be interesting.
And I don't know on the definition of competing. Are they knowingly competing against each other, or are they just in the same region? I'll have to check out that series to see.
Interesting. Your dogs are not happy again. Forever Yours. The Hillside Strangler killed my ex-boyfriend's cousin. Oh, Lordy mercy.
Yeah, Bianca and them, they were
that's awful.
Most certainly true evil.
And Zuder, has the Zodiac been solved?
That's been put up in the air. Some people say that some of the DNA sciences have linked it. And then I was talking to Fig Sauls, and who is another YouTube creator, as everybody knows and respects. And I've got to get back with him. He was going to get me some information on that. Will it be solved? If they have his DNA at some point, it will be solved. If they have the DNA profile that they say they have off that stamp, it'll be solved at some point. Have they already? I don't know.
And Kathleen, I was thinking cell data pings from different crime scene areas could be compared to single out offender.
They will do that. Yes, they'll put it through algorithms and check that.
And Lynn, are they connecting these cases together because of the bullet they find? One gun and bullets match?
There's so much that it depends on what type of weapon. It could be a bullet. It could be a shell casing. If it's a firearm that is a semi-automatic, and it every time it fires, if it ejects a round, a spent round on the ground, that are they identifying it from the primer marks, or are they identifying it from the bullet lands and grooves? I don't know which one they are. but there's several different ways that they might be identify that certain weapon other than just by caliber. So I don't know which way they're looking at that.
It would be a great video to go into the visionary, mission-oriented, etc. list, and a full video with examples of people who meet that. Would be cool to learn that. There you go. Homework.
Yes, homework. Thank you. Give me homework.
Why not? It would be interesting.
Oh, speaking of homework, next week we got series. I've got another for those of you that like the CSI part that I did on Delphi. I've got another part of CSI that I've been working on. It's taken several days that will be coming out next week as I let everything prepare for to dry out and as I start processing it. So any of you that are interested in the CSI aspects of the Delphi case, I've got, like I said, another one coming out next week.
And Single Mama 4, wow, never heard that before. So we walked past 50 serial killers in our lives. Well, now I'm going to be passing others thinking, are they a serial killer?
Yeah. And it's scary because, like I say, it's not like they're wearing well, some of them might be wearing certain indicators in this environment because people, there's so much counterintelligence out there and so much information, and people wear such offensive clothing sometimes.
904. I'm still adding. And dandelions and daisies. We only know the serial killers who get caught.
You're correct, 100%. You may suspect and not know it, but if you do suspect anyone, let law enforcement know.
Copper Horse. I worked with the most prolific nurse serial killer very shortly before he was arrested. I was telling my coworkers I had a gut feeling something was wrong with him. Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, I don't know if I know. I know there's been several of these male nurses that were that. Yeah, I know Charles.
Oh,
I don't know if it's the same one,
okay.
but I know there's been several of them, and some of them linked to in the hundreds. But that's scary.
Would an angel of death that slowly poisons their patients come under thrill killer?
You have thrill killer, and you have some of them that say they do it for mercy killing, that they did it because they felt sorry for the victims. And is that visionary? There's probably several different ways, but these psychopaths, they're going to make, when they get caught, they're going to make themselves look like in the best light they can because they were doing it for what they thought was good. Regardless of what it means, that's just part of their life. And once they get caught, they are the victims. That's just the way that these people think. And you're nothing to them other than whatever it feeds their whatever aspects of their fantasy and how they interact with you. And but like I said, there's true evil out there, but there's a lot of different reasons they do it. And we may never know all of them, but we know quite a few of them.
All right, and True Crime with Sunshine, the brain scans that I watched on the documentary, different parts of his brain lit up. It was not what I expected.
Oh, yes. And that technology is fascinating. And where will it lead? And where they eventually get that, where polygraphs and you can go in and do these studies and understand about and identify more victims through that. I'm hoping.
All right, and Molly, I would have a problem becoming bait, but I appreciate very much that Ellie will make that sacrifice for us.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, though, there's always people out there, they'll go out, they'll exchange, they'll do whatever they can to put themselves out there and do their job.
Here's a follow-up question from Teresita. Do the officers get paid more if they're used as bait?
No, no. um, um, we don't get hazard pay. We don't get
should.
it.
All right. And Ann, I'd speculate that LE may have a pretty good general description of the perp. Urban homeless communities are pretty aware when an outsider shows up in their midst, such that LE may have composite.
You're right. Plus, I mean, I don't, and we don't know what type of weapon he's using, and we don't know if it's silenced or if he's using homemade silencers, or if he's just firing a firearm in the middle of the night and people are calling it in, or because when you shoot a firearm, it most has a signature. It has a sound signature that if you don't take certain or use certain instruments to quiet that, people take notice when a gun goes off.
And Anna, I believe my neighbor kid was a serial killer. He was a creepy kid and discovered meth in his teens. He's doing life without parole for decapitating a woman.
Interesting. Interesting. Is that
scary?
Send me an email. Well, actually, I think she was one on Idaho and
Oregon.
mm-hmm.
And CJK, the Zodiac has terrified me since I was a kid in California.
Yeah, I watched that movie. One of the movies of Zodiac. There's 2 or 3 of them out there. I never did really like the movie The Most Dangerous Game, but the Zodiac movies, I've watched them and found them quite interesting. Although I know there are drama and theatrics involved in it, but still interesting to watch.
And sees through. What happens if you have a suspect in an interview room and your partner disagrees with you that he is a suspect? Does that happen?
Oh, yes. You know, you bring in people and you go in there and you do whatever your role is during that interview. But you try to get people that in that interview that are in the same state of mind and believing he is a suspect, because you don't want have any cues in there that you've got 2 people that are working against each other. So, and you'll have investigations sometimes where there would be multiple suspects, and you just wouldn't mix that up in the interview room. And but would it occur? It's possible, but most of the time you'll work around and try not to have opposing views of a suspect, because it's hard enough to get a confession when you're just working against the offender, but working against the offender when he has support would just be absolutely unbelievable.
And Anna, the Zodiac 340 cipher was recently solved. I still think there's another layer of information, but doubt there would be anything useful.
I've watched some of those documentaries. They are extremely interesting.
And Anna, today I heard they have, quote, good DNA from one of the Zodiac crimes. Never heard that before.
I had heard off the letter that on the stamp that they had been working that DNA profile for a long time, but they may have other, that he may, especially whenever you use a knife, as he did in some of his crimes, that the risk of injury is, heightened, and hopefully he cut himself, or even from firing a gun. Sometimes some of those guns, if it's certain types of firearms, they'll bite you, and when they bite you, they can most certainly allow you to injure yourself, whereas they could be blood.
You want to explain how they bite?
No,
they're not teeth.
Yeah, they don't have teeth on, but certain firearms that whenever they operate, such as a semi-auto, when the slide comes back, if you have your hand positioned wrong, you're not holding it properly, that slide, which is a big chunk of metal, will come back and knock skin off and possibly create a wound that would
bleed a lot
and leave your DNA profile there.
And Kathleen, when someone is shot, can they recover DNA or fingerprints from bullets extracted from victims?
Yes, you can process if it's a certain type of weapon. Like I said, whenever you fire it, semi-auto expends a round or spent casing on the ground. You process those for fingerprints. Sometimes you get lucky; you'll get a partial. But then, if bullet passes through someone, can DNA be obtained from the bullet? In some cases, yes.
And Kay McBride, Stockton Ellie said the killer is mission oriented.
Okay. I hadn't heard that part, but thank you.
And Forever Yours, Steve, what's the difference between a serial killer and a mass murderer?
Mass murders is during a certain time. It's sort of like your active shooters go in there and all their victims are within one location in a very short time frame. And serial killers is over a more time frame. There's a cooling off period between offenses, whereas it's not that way with mass murder.
In Teresita, I agree with Mrs. Steve. You should get hazard pay, in my humble opinion. As a citizen, I wouldn't expect or want an officer to do that without compensation. That's sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we did it, but,
You did it.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. It's a job to do, and there's certain rewards feeling wise when you go out there and you get some of these people off the street. And I found that extremely rewarding.
And Double Rainbows. Is our society doing something wrong breeding serial killers? Can we prevent that somehow?
No, psychopaths are born. And when one's born, he's there. And there's not a thing we can do about it.
And Kid Check the Rhyme. Does the FBI count gangbangers who kill more than two with a cooling off period as a serial or spree or something else?
I don't know how they classify that. That is an interesting question. I don't know how they would do that, because you could have, whereas a certain offender would meet certain definitions.
In Anna at Lake Berryessa, Zodiac tied up two victims. Unless he wore gloves, maybe he left DNA on the cord he used to tie them. That was a stabbing, but no indication Zodiac was injured.
Yeah. The male lived and the female died.
Ooh. Yeah. All right. So hold on one second. Let's see here if there's anything else. Okay, sees through. Do you believe that O.J. Simpson was botched or just the case of having a good defense team?
That is one of most certainly the dream team was exactly that. Never has such a team been organized for the defense of an individual in my lifetime. In past, maybe, but that was a high-profile case. And every one of those were noted attorneys, and the defense lived up and did what they were paid to do, and the prosecution failed to get their case proved. And the civil case was a different matter. It's I don't think the prosecution botched the case, but the defense most certainly was able to convince that jury, either through jury selection or otherwise, to acquit him. And they did.
And CJK, spot on, Steve, about psychopaths. Question about Otis Toole. He had an awful childhood that may have also even warped his mind more. Still a born psychopath?
And he set back so many investigations. If you went to him, he confessed to it. It was just sad how many officers went just to clear a case, and clear so many cases. And we were fortunate that they identified that at a certain point to stop that, because if you gave him enough clues, he would confess to it, and he did so hundreds of times.
And Mrs. Steve, did you notice the serial killers per state that Georgia is number 8 in the top 10 with 408? Somehow that's not overly shocking.
I hadn't seen. I've got to look up that site. I hadn't seen the serial killers per state. I've got to look that up.
All right, you are done.
Well, guys, I appreciate everybody coming here tonight and looking at this. Like I said, I originally was doing this to go into the Cyclops, and as we start looking at clusters over the next few days prior to our Delphi trip, and starting our Delphi information next week as we pack up and get ready and move on up and try to help those families, that we just wanted to this week do the Cyclops and thank all our volunteers that's helped us to get to the point that we're at now. And just appreciate everybody out there that supports us in so many different ways.
Thank you.
It means a lot to us. Y'all stay safe out there, and let everybody in California that shelter down until this psychopath's taken off the streets. But y'all be safe out there.
Thank you, mods.
Thank you, mods.
Greatly appreciate it. Y'all are the best.
Thank you.